Okay, good evening, everybody. Recording this on um, Saturday, a couple days early. We have 4 chapters again this week. But before I launch into the content for the week, I have a little bit of um, sad news. Um, I was forced recently to give a student in this class a 0 for the class for repeated occurrences of plagiarism, copying content from outside and using it as their own. I've I've posted a couple of announcements. If you haven't read all of my announcements, I encourage you to. Approximately a third of this class, maybe more like half, have been given an initial warning. This week, you all received the university's new policy on academic honesty, and I'm a firm believer in it. I absolutely have no respect, no tolerance for anyone that would grab content off the internet and try and work it around a little bit, change the words a little bit. We've seen some examples of uh, these article spinning websites I've told you about, paraphrasing websites that change the wording, but it makes you sound like an idiot when you post it. So I hope everybody has given up on that. So a little disappointing there, but that's that's the way it goes. This is higher education. It's about learning. It's about performing. It's not about paying your tuition and getting a useless diploma, and being, that person at work with a master's degree that everybody is like, you're kidding me. You have a master's degree from a university in the United States of America, and they can't communicate, can't analyze, can't bring information together, can't collect their own thoughts. So that's what I'm going for, guys. You you noticed last week I said no more Captain Obvious statements, right? Where you come in, people will reply, and you'll say, your post brings me great happiness and joyfulness in my heart to see such a wonderful response. Well, that's all. I gotta wonder if this is if you guys are being serious, or if you're just trying to get under my skin. Um, uh, Enough of the Captain Obvious. Just some stuff from the internet. Okay. In class discussion, I want you to share your thoughts, your experiences, your opinions. Clear enough? Your thoughts, your opinions, your experience, not drivel that you've collected off the internet, or the textbook. Okay. So, two things: originality, writing originally, and conversing conversationally. And enough of this filling in the blank, with just some stuff. I've seen people cutting and pasting, you know, stuff from their original post in their discussions. Nobody needs to see a sentence that you put in your original reply in your reply to them, guys. It's a anyway. So this week's assignments are easy. Week 5, this stuff is easy. Um, so to go out there and rely on the internet, study.com. I've seen material from study.com. I've seen material from Course Hero. I even found a site called Punjab Assignment Help. this week. While I can't believe you can pay somebody to get you a college degree. It's unsettling for a old school guy like me that did his own work. So anyway, fair warning: you get 1-0 on an assignment. If I see anything that looks anything like article spinning or using outside content, write your own material. Study the material, get it solid in your head so that you understand what you want to say, and then say it in your own words. Easy enough, right? You guys are you guys are smart. I just need to convince you to stop fooling around with your education and actually do your work. We'll see if this week is a magical occurrence. All right, on to our content. I'm going to stop sharing my camera and I'm going to share my slides. Again, these are easy chapters this week. This was really good. Some of the Langer stuff is um, tough. So I'm going to go into slideshow from the beginning. All right. So we got lecture number 5. So we're over halfway done already. Man, these courses go fast. Um, this first chapter is super easy. Bourgeois, pretty much generally speaking, is super easy. Um, but it's good information. It's not complex information, but it's vital information. It's really important that you know these terms and can describe them and you know who you're dealing with out there in the workplace. All right, so these are your learning objectives. Just pretty much, who does what in this whole IT uh, career field we live in. Um, this is a fairly recent chart that shows the number of people in the different roles. Uh, Less programmers than software engineers. I think there's a blurred line between software engineering and programming. Um, there's not a real distinct difference. So some people would say they're software engineers because they think it sounds better. Some people would say I'm a programmer because they think it sounds better. Whereas the lines are being blurred between them. A lot of systems analysts. What you're not seeing in here reflected, I believe accurately, is data scientists and data analysts. Um, that career field is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, making use of data, cleaning data, um, working with data marts. Those people may consider themselves programmers because they work with SQL. I don't know. Anyway, that's that. This is gonna be a long lecture because I actually like talking about everything that we have in our reading this week. So here's systems analysts. These are the people that talk to the user and generate requirements and generate um, requirements into design, um, so that somebody can get to work on what exactly are we going to do. Programmers, developers. These half of you guys are developers, I think, if not more. Um, and development, I mean, even that, it's not just writing Java classes being a developer. There's database developers. um, uh, you've got people that create the virtual environment that spawn all the virtual servers in the cloud and make sure that everything's set up and that you've got your test scaffolding, your development environment, with your databases, and all of your environment variables are set up. You've got people that decide, on which backend language is going to do what, where it's going to happen on which server. There's ways to segment different things. There's just so much going on out there. Computer engineers, um, Hardware engineer, that's not that my hat's off to those guys. That's the electrical engineers that are actually working on, boards and chips and all that. No, I've been called a programmer, and I've been called a software engineer. That second bullet there, software engineering is kind of more about the process and less about the code, I think. But again, there's a blurred line, lots of blurry lines between programming and software engineering. A systems engineer, now these guys are looking more at the whole picture, and they will bring in expertise as needed, in the form of software, hardware, and then you've got specialty engineer. You got network engineers. So a systems engineer brings in everybody. You can have an RF engineer. Um, so yeah, systems engineer. That's what I consider myself. I've got a background in electronics and software and telecommunications. Um, a computer operator. Um, these are the guys that care and feed, for the computer itself from a hardware standpoint. You're seeing less and less people that consider themselves computer operators than it used to be. Back in the day, back when you had tape drives and mainframe computers, and dumb terminals that would uh, be connected via either teletype or a hard line. It took people to operate a computer back then. Computers now, servers, kind of not so much. And you can have, one uh, systems administrator, one sysad can take care of, dozens and dozens, hundreds of servers. So you see that less. Database administrator, that's really more about the person that backs up the data, that does user roles and creates views, that sort of thing. But is really more along the lines of the carrying and feeding of the database itself, user accounts, those sorts of things, as opposed to a database developer, that is more about designing tables and getting the normalization correct and load balancing and all that. And then, of course, a great entry level job, help desk, or support analyst, where some people are in help desk and they are answering just like pure service outages, like your cell phone help desk, cell phone provider help desk. Others, you're maybe like Cumberland's, and maybe you've got a question about iLearn, which is Blackboard. That's really more of an application support specialist, um, help that's really an expert in a particular application, and you've got those everywhere. Salesforce, um, Oracle, Google's products. And then a very important but overlooked role here is a trainer. A lot of this stuff changes so fast, as we talk about the dynamism in Langer. This stuff changes quickly, and you've got to have somebody who is good at training, that can keep up with the technology, so that they can develop new corporate training for these new tools without being left behind. So sometimes the trainers are the smartest guys in the building, because they know a little bit about how all this stuff works and they've seen it come and go. All right. And then, of course, what most of us aspire to is the chief information officer. Um, but sometimes these guys are not coming from technology. Sometimes they come from business units, and they're learning the technology as a necessity. But they're really more about they're smarter at the strategic integration, like Langer talks about. They're smarter when they come from a non-technical background, um, at making sure that information technology stays relevant and supportive of the overarching corporate strategy. What you don't want is a CIO who's just a nerd that makes sure that the computers are up and running. Um, in fact, they're even some companies are moving from, especially solution providers are moving where a CIO is really just the guy that keeps the computers running, and the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, is really the guy out there on the cutting edge, making sure the company stays competitive. Functional manager is like somebody over HR systems or over the accounting and finance systems. A functional area systems manager worries about the the lines of operation in the business, both support and the business drivers. Well, I've got a little bit of lightning here. I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas on Saturday afternoon, and it is storming. I hope I don't lose my electricity. um, and then ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning Software Manager. That's that more of a broad brush. Project managers are incredibly important. A good project manager um, will see all of the pieces. They're not necessarily the decision maker, but they're the tracker. They're the one that keeps everybody informed and on the same sheet of music, and they let management know when things are falling behind schedule or over budget. And then you've got, ISSO, Information Systems Security Officer. As many of you are in cybersecurity, that's a huge role. It's getting more and more and more and more complex. And then we've got emerging roles, like I talked about. Data analysts um, are coming out. Bourgeois talks about a few more. There's like a social media marketing, which is kind of a tech tech marketing sort of hybrid. You've got really good combination career paths heading out there now. And some people follow a technical track, some people follow a management track. This is for you guys to understand or to decide. You can usually hop over from technical to manager if you don't let yourself get shoehorned into a corner as just a technologist, just a good programmer, just a good database guy, just a good analyst. Um, so yeah, Bourgeois got some good thoughts on that. Certifications, there's a sidebar. Do they matter? I think they matter, but generally they seem to matter more in the operational career fields, like the Cisco certified networking track seems to matter more as a network engineer. Microsoft certified systems engineer or Microsoft certified solutions professional, all of those things seem to matter more than like a Oracle Java programmer or a C sharp .NET certified programmer. But you guys, you should look into that yourself. PMP, project management professional, is still a valuable certification. The security side of things, they definitely want to see CSSP. So it can't hurt when you've got that certification. It's good on your resume and it separates you from someone else. So it's not something that you want to ignore. And then Bourgeois goes into organizing IT, and there was some really good reading on there on like how you can get kind of like almost a little rogue IT shop going in a business unit. When in my career, we called them hobby shops. Any sort of development effort or something going on outside of the main corporate IT oversight um, became somewhat of a hobby shop. Um, Bourgeois had a term for it. I just read it a little while ago. It wasn't end user computing, it was the other one right before end user computing, where he talks about this phenomenon where to gain some control, a business unit will start its own little IT squad. Um, and then you can have matrix, where a matrix organization means that you have a boss, as a systems analyst or as a database guy or whatever. You have a supervisor structure within IT, but then you get moved out to be on several other teams that have people from different areas, different users, different subject matter experts, um, so that you could be supporting, three, four, or five of these matrixed teams. But everything that you do according to the practices and policies of your parent organization in IT. And then Bourgeois talks about, uh, um, distributed versus standalone IT departments, and so does Langer, in the organizational standpoint. And of course, Bourgeois talks about outsourcing, offshoring, how to um, make that decision. Langer goes into it a lot this week on virtual teams, so we'll get into that. And then the types of users out there. You've probably seen all of these. Uh, you guys are probably all innovators and early adopters. Most of us in IT tend to adapt technology. But this chart was actually, this initial assessment was on farmers. If you read that, who decided to start using a tractor versus a mule? I mean, that's what the research that fed this model. So innovators are the people that like they build their first Raspberry Pi themselves. That's early adopters are people that bought the Raspberry Pi when it first came on sale. Early majority, the first crowd of people that bought the iPhone. Late majority, they bought an iPhone because their friends had one, and then a laggard. Look that word up if you're not if you're not familiar with what a laggard is. It's the people that you just gotta drag them kicking and screaming into the modern world. So those are your types of users. So that was a good chapter for Bourgeois. I thought that was really interesting. And then the next one is the development cycle. You guys are all into this. Here's um, your objectives, but none of this should seem strange to any of you. In fact, I'm sure some of you um, could probably do this lecture yourself. Of course, software is just a collection of instructions for the computer that we write using programming languages. And then Bourgeois goes into some development methodologies. Seemed like there were three: the traditional SDLC or waterfall. Then he talked about agile and then lean. I'm familiar with agile. I've done development 100 times in waterfall, SDLC. Don't have any experience with lean. So if some of you guys want to share that there should be room for you to share it when I ask for your thoughts, your experience, your opinions. You should be able to work that in if you're working with lean. Um, so yeah, waterfall. This is typical old school. The the plus side of this, the benefit of this, is that it tends to not miss anything, and you have formal reviews before you move on to the next phase. The downside is it takes forever, and things can change uh, up here in preliminary analysis and system analysis. Things can change if you take a long time to design your solution and then move into programming, and just when you start to test something, it could be that one of your users comes back and says, oh, whoa, the world's changed, you got to redo your analysis. It takes a long time to get through to implementation here, depending. This tends to look at a system um, in its entirety, that you are getting every user requirement, and when you get to implementation, everything that you ever are going to want to do on this system that we know about is implemented. And that's just not realistic. So that's what gave birth to more rapid development methodologies like rapid application development. I've done this where you because software can be built so quickly now with tools like like access. I mean, it does things for you. You can whip up a quick prototype that can then be used to feed a design system that can a real world system can be based off of your prototype really quick. um, so you try and get a working prototype going quickly. Rapid prototyping is what they used to call it. Then, of course, Agile, that's what everybody's using now. We have this backlog of user stories that we try and get into a 2 week sprint, and we're basically code test field, And the web changed things a lot. When you can just do a tweak to a web page and then just implement those files out on the server, and then all of your user base can see it. That's different than having to test and make sure everything's right, because you're going to burn copies onto CD or floppy disks, and you're going to distribute them, and people are going to download those fixes and apply them. And yeah, it's just things got really different with web and now with mobile. I mean, if you got to do an update, you just throw it out there on the Play Store, and uh, and the user system ecosystem just takes care of it. So yeah, Agile. You got to have your users and your developers all working, and your testers all working together. You get together daily and make sure that everything's on track. And the real important thing is it's short time, quick kills, doing the things that make the biggest difference to the user first. Um, and and not trying to there's an old colloquialism out there about trying to eat the entire elephant. We don't try and eat the whole elephant. We got to bite-sized chunks, and that's what Agile is really good at. And then Lean, I thought Lean was really cool. This minimum viable product. Don't shoot for the moon. That's what caused problems with traditional waterfall or SDLC projects. Is they are too aggressive. There's too many requirements, or the scope is too large. Lean uh, is kind of that rapid application development sort of thing, where you try and now what's the minimum you can get by with, and the rest of it you can keep doing with the other system, your old system, or you can have a manual process. But what's the minimum we can get by with to get a system in place so that we can then build. So that would be interesting to hear your perspective if any of you are doing lean development. Um, okay, the sidebar, the quality triangle. All of you need to have this memorized, if nothing else, for having it in conversation. There's a triangle. Sometimes it's called the project management triangle. Hopefully you've heard of this before. The three legs of that triangle are time, cost, and quality. You can pick two, okay? It's you can have something. It's just like, if you take your car to the custom shop and you want them to do some work to it, whether it's working on the stereo system or painting it or reupholstering the seats, or uh, regardless, any project, any task, these three legs all matter. Home improvement projects, it's the same thing everywhere you go. So it's time, cost, and quality. You can have it fast and you can have it cheap, but it won't be good. There won't be high quality. You can have it fast and you can have it with good quality, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. You can have it with good quality at a low cost, but you're going to wait forever until they can work it into their schedule and do it as a side thing. So that's that triangle. They are all interdependent. If you decrease uh, um, the schedule time, from a project management standpoint, if you decrease the schedule time and try and get something done sooner, you're going to have to figure out a way to reduce the quality, which can be not really quality, but reduce the scope, or increase or pay more, hire another developer, which you can't always rely on, because sometimes it takes more time to bring somebody new on board, than it does than they ever contribute to the project. So anyway, that's a great sidebar. You guys really need to understand and be able to talk about that one fluently. And then you've got programming languages. We talked, first generation's basically machine language. Second generation was assembler, where you have, mnemonics that for get, put, and compare and all that. I programmed in assembler for a couple of weeks in college. Nobody. If you're doing that, man, you have your own little career going on if you're programming in assembler. Third generation is what we all basically came up on: C, Pascal, those sorts of things. Even considering object-oriented programming, C++, Java, Ruby, those sorts of things. And then fourth generation tends to be these languages that they almost read your mind and do things with one command. I would include Python as a fourth generation language. Python is incredibly powerful, especially when you start bringing in all of the available libraries for data analysis. I would consider Python a fourth generation language. You can use it like a third generation language, but SQL is lumped in there, and there's some other ones. So just the evolution of telling a computer what to do. It gets easier and easier and easier, and of course, artificial intelligence is going to create a fifth generation programming language where you're just basically asking a computer questions and then getting it to remember how it solved that problem so it can solve further problems. And yeah, it's just going to be incredible. Okay. Systems and tools, a compiler versus interpreted. If you're not in software, this can be a little confusing. Compiling um, is like um, an interpreter that takes a book written in one language and translates it to another language so that people in that secondary language can read it, can consume it natively. Okay, that's done one time, and now everybody, say something was written in German, and it was translated into English. Well, now everybody that speaks English can read that book from the original German however many times they want to. An interpreter, from a software standpoint, is like the person standing in the United Nations, that is hearing a speech in German and talking in English in real time to interpret that speech. So an interpreter runs software like a Python interpreter. Python code is is interpreted and run every time. A C program is compiled into the native machine language of whether it's a Raspberry Pi or an Intel-based PC or a Mac or a phone. That each CPU has its own machine language, so that's what a compiler does. Um, I'm not going to get into procedural versus object-oriented programming. If you guys ever take a programming course, hopefully you'll learn objects late. I learned programming in regular 3GL procedural languages, and then I learned what object-oriented programming was, and it made sense to me. But learning objects early, um, it it can be really confusing, but then once you get it, it's good. You're good to go. And then, of course, Bourgeois talks about IDEs. Case tools kind of died. They never were really as good at generating software as you thought they would be. But there are some shortcuts out there. I know there's some software that will generate your Java classes based on a database schema. That's pretty cool. At least it gets you the scaffolding, something to start with. And then, of course, mobile apps, Java development. That's just another computer, and there will be more. There will be, you know, the mobile car computer that's not just running the engine, but it's actually providing content and doing things for the user going down the road. Um, there will your home assistant, your smart home is a platform basically for applications. So there'll be other platforms for application development. Build versus buy. Y'all, a lot of y'all write software. Um, when you're when you're deciding, to implement software from a strategic level, you have to decide whether it's smart to pay one of us or do software as a service. Why would I develop my own web application if I can subscribe to a, Salesforce or Microsoft CRM or something like that that does the same thing? Um, and then if you're a programmer, you know all about, especially a web programmer, you know all about the services that are available out there. Sometimes they cost a little bit. You got to pay a little bit to use an API, application programmer interface, programming interface, but it keeps you from having to do anything. And you can go out, you can reach out, and you can grab content and solutions that span the gamut. You can go grab weather maps, and you can grab, navigation maps, and you can grab particular algorithms that will peer into data and return to you. Facebook has APIs that you can call and grab Facebook user data out of. There's no end of what Google and Facebook and Amazon are doing as far as web services APIs. That's huge. And then Bourgeois had a cool section on end user computing. This is where you see that guy. He's not a programmer, but he's kind of technically savvy, and he's the guy that developed a spreadsheet that the whole company depends on. And there's a great case study in there. I'm trying to remember the name of the company, where they had end user spreadsheets feeding into the balance sheet, into the accounting and finance system, and it wasn't the problem. But you don't really want untested, unregulated, unaudited software out there on some user's desk that is feeding your enterprise information system if you can avoid it. Uh, Try and bring that stuff into the main flow so that you know what's processing, you know what's happening. That was a really good. And then, yeah, different ways of implementing a system. Once you finally get um, to the point of implementing, you can direct cut over. Cut the switch on the old system, cut over to the new one. You can do a pilot project, which is usually bringing in just a portion of your user base um, to be um, a pilot is a nautical term. When a large cruise ship comes into a port or a large container ship comes into a port, they are led into the port by a pilot. So a pilot project is a small group of your users leading the way with a software implementation. Hope that makes sense. Parallel ops, that's where you run both systems until you are satisfied that the new one is good, and you can deactivate the old one. Um, it's expensive because it's tough for your users because often they're having to put data in both directions. And phased implementation is usually the best way to go. That's where we talk about like agile, where you're bringing in capability. You're not trying to eat the whole elephant. You bring in capability in phases. Change management is not configuration management. Change management is the idea of, like Langer talking about cultural assimilation and strategic integration and and resistance to change. You know, and then maintenance. When a system gets fielded, all you're doing is fixing bugs. Somebody's going to find a bug, or one of your pieces of software will change, or they'll update Java and break something, or something will happen. and you got to figure out what happened. A database import export failed, and you have to go in and troubleshoot what happened. Somebody will load some bad data into your database, and it'll break things, and you got to go troubleshoot it. So that's system maintenance. Okay, and then we move in. That's bourgeois. So you've got the usual study questions and exercises in bourgeois. Those are easy, but write them in your own words. Some of you are freaking out about vitals, safe assign, and the safe assign score. Now, I don't care about the safe assign score. I've seen good assignments come in with 50, 55% because you're cutting and pasting bourgeois questions into your paper, as you should be. I want to see the questions, so it reminds me, as I'm going through it, especially with the first three or four, as I'm going through and spot checking answers. I want to see the questions, but I want to see the answers in your own words. Like I said, somewhere between a third and a half of you have been given your first warning. It's absolutely simple to go out to the internet and cut and paste the answers to these things. They're fairly straightforward answers. I don't care. Write it out in your own words. Don't look at bourgeois while you're doing your homework. That would help. Don't even look at it. Close it out and then answer in your own words. You won't have a problem. It's when you've got them open and you're cutting and pasting and you're trying to change a few words here and there that you run into trouble. So just close out bourgeois and answer it all. You're not going to lose any points for something that's slightly off track. You're gonna get kicked out of the university for cheating. So you choose which direction you want to go. Okay, so Langer talked about virtual teams and outsourcing. I'm not going to belabor what he talks about. Virtual teams are not necessarily, but they're often dispersed. So you got people working on the same project from all across the globe. And for corporations to deal with basically the inevitable of dealing with a global team is tough. For me, I was in the military. My team was spread across the globe. We had a headquarters in Tampa. We were often working in Iraq, Afghanistan, Europe, Africa. So we're across the globe. When I worked in Japan, everybody, like the Pentagon, everybody was 12 hours away, half a world away. So you have to get used to doing things that are a little agnostic to time zones. Um, and the biggest part of failure is bad communication. It can be tough. This is what I did my dissertation on: is knowledge creation and knowledge transfer in dispersed teams like this that have high turnover. Um, the status of virtual teams. Yeah, this attribution theory Langer talks about. This is where when you're in a distributed team and you can't see these people all day every day, you tend to say, well, it wasn't our fault. We did fine. It's those people over there that messed things up. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting point. But we're going to talk about virtual teams and communication and what helps. Now, particularly these four bullets: externalization, internalization, combination, and socialization. This is huge in my world of enterprise social media and knowledge management. Externalization is where you get someone that knows how to do something. You get them to create and distribute their knowledge. You get the knowledge, the domain knowledge that they have, and you externalize it for other people. And then internalization is the other direction, where people that don't necessarily know something are given the tools to learn it, whether that's, explicit knowledge from their coworkers, or combined with training, combined with a strategic viewpoint from management. That's, all of those combine to factor into internalization. Combination is kind of what I was talking about, where you bring in multiple factors, you bring in information from multiple sources and combine it together to form new knowledge. Socialization is all about enterprise social media at work. It's like Facebook at work, where you're not sharing, cat pictures or, your opinion on politics. You are talking about your projects. You're talking about what you learned this week, what you did this week, what you accomplished. You're posting blog entries about how you have changed what you're doing to reflect the corporate strategy. You're contributing to wiki articles, corporate wikis that document processes and knowledge. So that's the socialization aspect of knowledge creation and virtual teams. So you have to have a platform for that, and that's where things like SharePoint excel. There are others out there. Microsoft's got Yammer integrated with SharePoint and Skype. So anything that gets you off of shared drives and out of emails and makes your messaging more persistent and your documents better managed is going to be a step in the right direction. Yeah, this table talks about tacit knowledge and getting that tacit knowledge out where it can be used by the community. Um, Multiple locations and outsourcing. Like I said, we'll talk about this. This is your assignment this week. One page on how to do this better. Virtual teams. And then we go into chapter 8. Now for Langer, chapter 8, don't feel like you need to read the whole chapter. Just read the case study where DZ was the corporate level CIO. So he's the top level CIO of a huge, international business, Siemens, that had 20 something companies underneath it. And all of those companies had their own chief information officers. So how do you get, if you're the corporation Siemens and you're trying to put together solutions and workflows between these individual operating companies, how do you do that? And we'll talk about what DZ did to um, enhance that information flow, or you'll turn in an assignment about it. Um, so yeah, he put together a board of all those cross company CIOs. He didn't worry so much about who the CIOs reported to. They often report to the chief financial officer, which is concerning. Most C-level executives want to report to the chief executive officer, and in many companies they do, but it's not universal. So anyway, read that case study. I've been talking too long already. Read that case study, and you'll be looking for a particular thing that we'll have, and I'm going to go into in the discussions. Um, Here's the kind of the food chain for how the CIO advisory board fed into the chief financial officer quarterly board, because most of them reported to the CFOs, and then the president's council. All 20 of those businesses also had their own, uh, you know, president and chief executive officer. So, yeah, wrangling a company like that takes some serious leadership and oversight. So there you go. And the results. That's what I'm going to want you guys to talk about. Okay, so here's the discussion. Um, we talked about Bourgeois' chapter was talking about software development. Okay, so I want you to review that section and then check out the bold type here on this slide. Okay, using your own words and your own workplace experience. Do you understand that? If you don't understand what I'm talking about, please email me. Okay. I want you to use your words, not some garbage you found on the internet. Okay. I don't want you to lecture each other with these Captain Obvious snippets of stuff that you found on the internet. I want you to talk to each other conversationally in class discussion. So that is as simple as I can put it. Simple and plain. Don't just post stuff you found on the internet. Okay. Use your own opinion and experience and discuss the following. Okay. Why is it important in a system development to have firm requirements early, early in that life cycle? Okay. And what process have you seen to help manage requirements? Everybody out there is in the workplace. You're all working, so or have worked in IT. So I want to see what what your experience is. If you don't have experience with this, ask questions. You can post a little bit of stuff you found on the internet only in order to frame a question, like, "Hey, Bourgeois talked about this requirements management. I'm not exactly sure what a requirements management database is. Do any of you have experience with it? Can you help me?" And then that way, when you reply, you are again using your own words and your own experience. Oh, your post was very informative, and I am happy and joyful to have learned from what. Okay? Don't talk like that. Be for real. Okay? Be for real with each other. All right. So that's the first question. And then the second part of this discussion is, who do you think are the most important people to be involved, and when do you need them to be involved? And what do you think can be done to increase the success from a people perspective, not from project management software? Don't go out and look up software project success and talk about, some automated tool or some garbage. Okay. From a people perspective, what what can be done to increase project success? This is going to require you to think, and write in your own about your own experience and your own thoughts. This is going to be a challenge. Again, first post should be by Thursday, and I'm looking for your thoughts and experience. And too many of you are trying to sound smart because you're in a master's program, and I gotta sound impressive here. No, don't try to sound smart. Okay, try to sound like someone who has experience, but don't try to write in order to make people, make you sound smart to me. I would rather hear you. I would rather read your writing in purely conversational English than try and sound academically brilliant. Okay, it's in class discussion. Your papers, that's a slightly different issue. But anyway, 250, 300 words, and two or three replies to your fellow students. So that's the discussion board this week, just like always. Here's your usual bourgeois stuff. Uh, um, yeah, HTML, and then um, yeah, that first exercise. So yeah, your usual bourgeois. Again, answers in your own words. Close out the text and write the answers in your own words. And answer the question. That's the other thing. Some of you are turning in stuff that has nothing to do with the question. It might have a word or two. Read and analyze the question and answer the question. This is not rocket science, guys. It's barely even computer science. Okay. And now Langer. Okay. For Langer, chapter 9, just review the section on virtual teams, and then here's your one page. Explain the factors that can help and the factors that can hurt the performance of virtual teams. Langer goes into several tools and techniques and things. And then chapter 10, just review the Siemens case study. We're only looking at what DZ did as the corporate. Now, I want you to write about what he did, what DZ did, um, that were the most important actions, and you can justify what you thought. He took several actions in there, that's in the chapter. If you read that, it's 10 pages. If you read that and you see the actions he took, you should be able to tell me what you think the most important actions are. 2 actions is enough. Heck, 1 action would be okay, as long as you're writing originally and answering the question. Okay, and you can justify your answer using personal experience. You can say, DZ did this, and I saw it work because I worked for a CIO one time, or I saw a CIO that did it, and it worked for him. Yeah, but again, at this point, guys, I'm going for originality. I want to see your own writing. Uh, Half of you are in danger of failing this class if you ever plagiarize something again. So at this point, don't try and sound smart or turn in the what you think is the answer I'm looking for. Write originally. Okay. 2 pages. There you go. There's our references, and I have been talking too long, so I will see you out there in the classroom.